What if I don't like how my drawings look? We're not necessarily talking about accuracy because we could draw the same scene in a different style and have a different feel. If I don't like the style that I seem to have when I draw, is it possible to change my drawing style? How do I go from something that looks a little bit boxy to a drawing style that has a lighter feel in some way, or at least a different feel? Let me explain 7 ways we can actually work at deliberately changing our drawing style.
The most obvious way is to actually improve our drawing skills, particularly those skills that we can see are weaker. It could be developing a more confident way of drawing our lines, making our marks on the paper. It may be improving our perspective angles. It may be working at keeping proportions correct as we draw across a scene. It may be through sharpening the way we hatch and the options that we have in our mind for hatching possibilities. Because it's all of these things, from the composition of what we draw, how we arrange the shapes, the values on our page, in our scene, and then the way we put marks on the paper to bring that scene to life. These are the things, when we start to do it consistently in certain ways, that start to create a sameness in a good way, a sameness in a way that means when someone looks at our drawing who knows our work, they can tell that we've done it because they can see the commonality of these techniques as we've refined our process of using them over drawing, over drawing, over drawing. A lot of the things I may be unhappy at the moment in how my drawings look that I'm thinking is just I have to change my style may actually be more I need to make improvements in the way I draw. Improvements in the way I visualize what I want to draw, and from that way of thinking, the marks I have at my disposal to create the effects that I'm after. So if I want to improve my drawing style or change my drawing style, I should keep working at all the skills that I draw on to create a drawing.
A second important way we can change our drawing style, we can develop our drawing style, is after every drawing to look hard at what we've done and say, okay, what am I happy with? What am I not happy with? What I'm happy with is an area that probably I don't have to work on right now. But the things that I'm not happy about, whether it's improving things such as perspective or proportion, or whether it's more stylistic things such as the way I make my lines, my marks, how much detail I show or don't show, how I represent certain things, these are the things, if I'm not happy with the effect, I can deliberately try and change. I might think, for instance, that there ends up being just too much visual clutter, which is hard to distinguish and actually fights against us seeing the actual scene. I might think that my figures are a weak spot, that they look very stiff and wooden and detract from a sense of realism, that they're more like shop mannequins than people strolling in the street. Or I may feel that my line work is all a bit the same and doesn't introduce the visual variety that we get in a scene such as this. Because if I relate back to the first point, that probably the most significant way to improve, to develop, to change our drawing style is to work on our drawing skills, then this helps me focus on those skills in those ways which will have the biggest impact most quickly on not just how my drawing looks, but how I feel about how it looks.
The third way we can change our drawing style, we can develop it, improve it, is to find the work of other artists whose work really inspires us, whose work we would really like our work to look, well, in all honesty, more like in some way, and to really study what they do and how they do it. Now, this is something we can possibly do better if we're not at the very start of our drawing journey, because in some ways we need a little bit of experience with technical skills, with the various techniques that can be used and how effects are created in order to be able to really understand what these artists who inspire us have used to create the visual effects that we're attracted to, that we wish could be more a part of our own work. Because we have to go beyond, I really like the way their drawings look, how can I make my drawings look like theirs? We have to be able to look at the marks they've put on the paper and say, how have they done this? What sort of marks have they combined in what sort of way to create the sorts of effects they have? And not just in particular parts, but how then the particular parts are combined in the overall scene to create the overall impact. Because it's by understanding how they create certain effects, let's say trees. If trees are a problem for me, if I'm not happy with how my trees look, if I can see they're a weak part in my drawing, then particularly when I look at the trees in the artists who inspire me, how do they create their trees? What marks do they make? How do they combine them? And not just in one tree that they've drawn, but in tree after tree after tree. Find as many of their drawings as I can and look at all the trees. If it's how they capture the effect of ornate architecture, the degree to which they draw a lot of detail or the degree to which they draw very little, and they so effectively simplify and convey, that is, put marks on the paper to present that simplification. How have they done that so that I can try and use these techniques? This is what I need to do. But I would certainly suggest really only doing it for one artist at the one time. Otherwise, it can be confusing. Combining a little bit of 10 different people's work is not the best way for us to develop our own coherent drawing style. And this fourth point won't surprise anyone. When I'm looking at the work of other artists whose work has inspired me, when I'm analysing what they've drawn, how they've drawn it, I think it's important to resist the urge to start to copy their drawings. This is not the way we learn to create our own drawing style. Because in order to use their work in my own work, I need to realise that the marks they've put on the paper that I'm studying so intensely have come from how they're thinking. What I need to do is to understand what they've done, how they've done it, perhaps try to work out why they've done it so that I can incorporate this reasoning into my creative thinking. The challenge, the difficulty, the skill is not to copy their marks. It's not to put those marks on the paper. It's knowing what to put where to create the effect that we want. And this creative thinking, this is what we need to develop. And we can't get that when we simply copy their marks. I think what is helpful is to choose very, very similar subjects to the ones that they've drawn that we're looking at. And then after closely examining how they've done this, put their drawing to one side so that we can't see it, and now seek to draw something very similar. Now, I'm still going to have to use my own creative thought processes. I'm going to have to work on my memory of what they've done. And in the end, I'm still going to have to create something that they haven't created, simply using, if you like, some of the keys that I've discerned in how they've drawn. But these are all things that I can take into every drawing I now do. And while it's easier to perhaps develop these ways of thinking and of drawing using very similar subjects to the ones I've seen these other artists do, from that point, I actually can start to extend these same techniques into other areas that are perhaps a little more different. But I'm able to extend them into new areas because I've actually assimilated them into my own creative thinking. And in the end, I'm going to be developing my own drawing style inspired by the work of these other artists, but something which is still truly mine.
The fifth way we can work at developing our drawing style, how our drawings look, is to, at the start of every drawing process, when we have our reference, before we put a single mark on the paper, is to ask ourselves, what am I wanting to bring out of this scene? Or what do I in fact want to create? What will I bring? What will I add to the reference in my drawing? These things, the answers to these questions, make choices about the various techniques I have for creating certain effects so that I can bring them together in the most effective way. And this will help my overall drawing have a commonality for all the different parts to work harmoniously and productively together to create an overall effect. In this scene, my desire was to have these two figures stand out more so even than they do in this photo, to make adjustments to the lighting so that they were the main event. And so that let me make a lot of choices that guided what I did, and I think helped create a cohesiveness in all of my marks and the techniques that I used. And these all flow towards a consistency that starts to create style. Or my aim may be, how can I create a really lively, bustling, street level effect where while the buildings go up and go back, I want the effect of a lot of activity in the street. If I know this is my focus, then it lets me make choices in a consistent way, and it's consistency in a particular drawing that creates, if you like, the predictability or the recognizability of the marks we make as belonging to us, as being our drawing style. Perhaps my aim is to capture the tangle of the Australian bush, for it to be, if you like, a jungle out there, particularly at ground level, and yet still create a clarity that, in fact, the photo has lost in its turning a three-dimensional scene with depth into a flat two-dimensional one, to make stylistic choices, technique choices, to put the sense of depth back in, to create a very strong sense that this tree is closest, this tree is the next closest, then there's this one, and then there's a larger one further back, and then this one is further back again, instead of the effect of the photo, which is where these all pretty much look as if they're in a straight line. By working out the visual effect I wanted to create before I start, I can make choices with every mark I put on the paper. And again, I get a cohesion that doesn't just create a certain effect, but also starts to define a drawing style. Or perhaps I have a streetscape and I really want to capture the feel of these shops stretching right back a long way. I want to create a real sense of depth from here to here in the way I draw these. And again, with that being my overriding aim, it gives me guidance for using the various techniques I've got, and over time helps create a consistency in how I draw things that starts to define my drawing style. Doing this takes us beyond simply drawing things accurately, such as the perspective angles or the proportions of various components. It goes beyond having good technical skills for creating certain effects, but leads us into combining all of these things now in a cohesive, style-defining way. And this is our sixth point. We need to have a goal of going beyond an accurate copy, which really is insufficient for developing a drawing style and can lead to drawings that in lots of ways look very competent, but have a fairly stiff and wooden and still somewhat cartoon-like artificial feel to them. But it also helps us to compose our scenes. When we have a scene, to make choices about, what am I trying to achieve? What do I want to capture? Is there just perhaps a part of this that has the balance, the contrast, the subjects that I feel I can exploit in how I draw? And so perhaps I can just hone in on a part of it and start to play off certain elements, similarities of form, balance of positioning, values, depth, foreground, background. Often, a big contributing part of what we might mistakenly think is an artist's drawing style is actually the compositional choices that they make. The sorts of, if you like, visual drama, visual theatre that they create by choosing scenes that have the potential to be a starting point for drawings that can be really arresting, can really draw us in. That, if you like, give us the possibility of creating a really effective drawing style, but not just give us the possibility, actually help lead us into the place where we push ourselves to create the possibility that the good compositional choices in our reference has given us. The seventh way I think we can work at developing our drawing style is to go back to drawings that we did some time before and then simply to redraw it. Now, this will let us see where we've developed skills and how we've changed what we do and how we do it. And it's when we compare the two that we can also get some direction as to, am I happy with the changes? Am I happy with the new possibilities? Do I understand what perhaps is looking different now to then? And are they all positives? Or perhaps there are some things that I prefer with my earlier drawing. And hopefully there is some encouragement from simply seeing how I've developed, how perhaps I'm able to do more complex things that in fact I didn't attempt or greatly simplified not that long ago. This can help me work out, however, if I'm on the track I want to be on for developing my drawing style, because this lets me see the difference between where my, if you like, natural rhythm of putting marks on paper to create a scene then and now is, and gives me some clues how I might deliberately keep that happening or make changes here so that in 6, 12, 18 months' time, if I do a third one of these, it's continuing to move in the direction that I want. Our drawing style is almost always an ongoing, evolving thing, but that doesn't mean that we can't make deliberate choices to nudge it fairly strongly in the directions that we want.
G'day, I'm Stephen Travers. I have to say it's really interesting personally to look back at how my drawing style has evolved over the last few years as I've simply drawn and drawn and drawn as my skills improved and I began to see possibilities in my drawing. These possibilities began to focus me more and more in ways that I felt I could improve the visual impact, the visual effect of what I was drawing, and let me focus and tweak these areas of drawing, particularly some of the technique-driven ones, that began to change the way my drawings overall looked. These changes were enabling me to create more accurately on my paper the sorts of creative thoughts I was having in my mind. And in the end, that did change how my drawings looked. But look, whatever you're trying to do, however you're doing it, watching my videos or not, make sure you have fun. I'll see you next time. Bye.